They whispered about her marriage until the truth silenced them all. The room was filled with silence, but not the kind that brought peace. It was the kind that judged, the kind that listened, observed, and quietly decided who you were without ever asking. Claire Lawson stood at the back of the room, her black dress simple, her posture composed, her hands gently folded in front of her. Her face showed no cracks, no visible grief, no outward emotion, and that alone made people suspicious. Because grief, in their minds, was supposed to be loud, messy, broken, not controlled, not quiet, not like hers. I think we all know why she married him. The whisper came from somewhere behind her, soft, polite enough to deny, sharp enough to wound. Claire heard it. Of course she did. She always heard them. Judgment rarely shouts. It settles. It lingers. It spreads quietly until it becomes something everyone believes is truth. And in that room, truth had already been decided. Claire Lawson was 28 years old. Her husband, Henry Lawson, had been 63 when he passed. To them, the equation was simple. Young woman, old, wealthy man, marriage, inheritance, conclusion. They thought they understood everything. They didn't understand anything. At the front of the room sat a polished wooden table. On it lay a stack of documents thick, official, final, the will. That was why everyone had come. Not for closure. Not for remembrance. For answers. For money. For confirmation of what they already believed. Claire slowly scanned the room. People revealed themselves in moments like this. Not through what they said, but through what they expected. Henry's daughter, Emily Lawson, sat in the front row. Elegant, controlled, untouchable. Her posture was perfect. Her expression even more so. But her eyes were cold. She had never accepted Claire. Not once. Not even for a second. To Emily, Claire had always been predictable. A young woman who saw an opportunity and took it. A transaction. Nothing more. She knew exactly what she was doing. Emily had once told others. She played the long game. Claire never responded to those words. Because sometimes, people don't misunderstand you. They simply choose a version of you that makes them comfortable. The lawyer stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. "Thank you all for being here today," he said, his voice measured and neutral. The room shifted slightly. Chairs adjusted. Whispers faded. Eyes sharpened. This was the moment they had been waiting for. We will now begin the reading of Mr. Lawson's will. Claire remained still, because unlike everyone else in that room, she wasn't waiting for answers. She already knew the truth. She just needed everyone else to hear it. The lawyer began reading. Formal language, structured sentences, assets listed, properties assigned, investments divided. Everything unfolded exactly as expected. Safe, predictable. People nodded subtly. Some even seemed relieved. This was the part they understood. Money being distributed in ways that made sense. But tension doesn't come from what people expect. It comes from what they don't. The lawyer paused. Just for a second, but it was enough. I would now like to read a personal statement left by Mr. Lawson. The room went still. Not the whispering quiet from before. A different kind. Focused, alert. Even Emily shifted slightly in her seat. That was the first crack. Because this was not part of the plan. The lawyer unfolded a separate sheet of paper. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Softer, more deliberate. If you are hearing this, he began, it means I am no longer there to explain things myself. And suddenly, Henry was there, not physically, but undeniably present, because truth doesn't need a body, only a moment. I am aware that many of you believe Claire married me for money. A ripple passed through the room. Subtle, uncomfortable, good. Let me clarify something. The letter continued. Claire is the only person in this room who ever refused it. Silence. Immediate. Heavy. The kind that presses against your chest. because that sentence didn't fit the story. And when something doesn't fit, people hesitate. Emily's expression tightened, only slightly, but enough to notice. When I met Claire, the letter continued, I was already sick. That changed everything. The air shifted, because that truth was never fully known. Not publicly, not clearly. I told her the truth before I told anyone else. Claire closed her eyes briefly. Memories flooded in. Hospitals, quiet conversations. The kind of fear Henry never allowed anyone else to see. She had every reason to leave, the letter said. She did not. A pause, long enough for it to settle. I offered her financial security. She refused. Murmurs. Soft, confused. I offered her property. She refused. Emily's posture stiffened. I offered her everything, and she asked for one thing. The lawyer paused again. Then read the next word carefully. Time. That word landed differently. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was real, and reality always hits harder than performance. Claire did not marry me for what I had, the letter continued. She stayed for who I was when everything else was gone. The room had changed. Completely. No whispers. No quiet judgment. Just silence. Because the narrative they had built was collapsing, and there was nothing ready to replace it. Claire opened her eyes slowly. She wasn't emotional. She wasn't angry. She was simply present, watching, because this moment was never about revenge. It was about truth, and truth doesn't rush. It unfolds. I know many of you will question her intentions, the letter continued. That is natural. But understand this. She was there when there was nothing to gain, and everything to lose. Emily shifted again. This time, more noticeably, her control was slipping. Not dramatically, but visibly. That is something none of you can say. No one moved, because there was no defense, no argument, no way to twist that into something else. Then came the final shift, the kind that changes everything. So I made a decision, the letter said. One that ensures Claire will never need to explain herself again. The lawyer looked up briefly, then continued. I leave the majority of my estate to Claire Lawson. The room exploded. Whispers returned, but louder now, sharper, emotional, uncontrolled. But it didn't matter, because the truth had already been spoken. This was just reaction. Emily stood up. This is not acceptable, she said, her voice controlled but strained. This is manipulation. No, it wasn't manipulation. It was clarity. And clarity always feels unfair to people who rely on assumptions. Claire didn't respond. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She didn't need to. For the first time in that room, she needed nothing from anyone. She stood up slowly, adjusted her sleeve, turned toward the door. Not rushed, not dramatic, just finished, because that's what closure looks like. Not loud, not emotional, just complete. At the door, she paused. Not for them, for herself, because moments like this matter. They don't define who you are. They define what you no longer allow others to define. She turned slightly. Just enough. You were all so certain, she said quietly. A small pause. You never asked if you were right. No one responded, because there was nothing left to say. Claire walked out of the room, and this time, the silence behind her felt different. Not judgment, not doubt. Something else. Something closer to truth. Outside, the air felt lighter. Not because anything had changed, but because something had ended. Not the whispers. Not the opinions. Those would always exist. But the weight of needing to prove herself, that was gone. Because the truth had never been about convincing them. It had always been about knowing. She never needed to. And somewhere, in the quiet space between memory and absence, Henry's voice remained. Not in the room, not in the letter, but in something far stronger. In the kind of truth that doesn't fade. the kind that doesn't depend on belief, the kind that simply exists. And for the first time since he was gone, Claire didn't feel alone. Because love, real love, doesn't need witnesses. It doesn't need approval. It doesn't need explanation. It just needs truth. And finally, the truth had been heard.